So the lunar path. So there's a wonderful statement put forth by one of Hatha Yoga's oldest text, the Garanda Samhita. And it's a statement, it's a guiding force behind the moon, you know. So once the moon has been made steady, the sun can be made to rise. Okay, so yoga asks us to be very clear in this point. If our mind is rubbish, if we can't harness it and focus it where we want to go, then there's really very little we can do in terms of actual yoga. So Swami Rama put it, a mind that is not tranquil is unfit for any path. Swami Rama, he's got a, you know, I'm doing this, I'm reading his life story just now, and he was right grumpy. You know, they go on, and he had this rage, and he did this and he did that, and I'm kind of like, yeah, you're supposed to be an enlightened being, but there's just actually no need for that. So I shouldn't really be judging Swami Rama. So apologies, Swami Rama. Apologies. I wasn't meaning to be unkind. Okay, I'm being such a weirdo today. Sorry about that. Anyway, a stable mind is the foundation of success when it comes to practice, and this is what is meant by steadying the moon. So without mental stability, not only are we unlikely to go forwards, but it's possible we could actually go backwards. So the power we cultivate through practice is like the rays of the sun, in that it does not distinguish between the pure and impure aspects of our mind. Everything gets illuminated via the power generated by committed self-practice. I said that earlier today. And it's a bit like the law of attraction. You know, you don't say, I don't want that, because that's what you're going to get. It's about saying, I want that. So it's putting the focus, like finding calm and focus. If you've got loads of issues and you do lots of sun practice, you're going to acerbate your issues in a sense. So Shiva, who wears the symbol of the crescent moon in his head, he's the ultimate guru of yoga. And yogis believe that when advancements are made in practice, it's through his grace. So what's interesting about Shiva iconography is, like, unlike yoga itself, Shiva will bless anyone that does the work. So he doesn't limit his grace to those he judges as worthy, just as the blessings of yoga knows no boundaries. Yoga is power, and it's good to smash the illusion early that yoga is about love. So hopefully as yogis we'll be wise enough to direct the power that we cultivate and practice towards our heart, towards love and towards devotion and service, but that's up to us. So we could also use that same power to manipulate and control people, acquire more money, or even curse people if that's our thing. So the choice is always ours when it comes to the path we take, and we alone will have to pay any karma incurred. Either way, be clear. Yoga is power, and that's why sages like Patanjali stress the importance of refining our personality by following certain moral codes of conduct, while simultaneously working with a systematic program of meditation and withdrawing the senses back inside to explore the contents of our mind. So this is the essence of classical yoga, also called Patanjali yoga or Raja yoga. So it's working with chitta, the mind, and the moon. So classical yoga differs dramatically from the solar approach, which prefers working with the force of prana over that of the mind. So nevertheless, even the path of the sun recognizes that deepening our relationship to prana is completely dependent on the relationship we have with our minds. So Patanjali proposed a mind-moon-based approach for the yogi's return journey towards pure awareness, which is Purusha. So another significant piece of the Yoga Sutra deals with the law of karma. It states that karma works like an endless wheel, causing the past to imprint the present and the present to imprint the future. So Patanjali tells us that unless we take positive action now, we will continually spin in an endless cycle of self-created suffering. So here are a few key terms and principles that are important to know in relation to karma chakra. So karma means all actions and events, both internal and external. And all actions create mental movements called vrittis. So vritti is so remember the Sutra 1.2, or is it 1.1? So it's the second sutra. So yoga chitta vritti narodaha. So vritti is an important one. So it's a thought wave, or that which is a tendency to spin. So thinking of a drop falling into a pond and the ripple it makes. So the more intense the event, or the news, or the thought, or the larger the vrittis or ripples, intense vrittis create samskaras. So we keep coming back, don't we? So samskara can be described as the imprint or impression that experience is leaving us. So these can be conscious and unconscious samskaras, meaning imprints that we're aware of and imprints that are influencing us from the level of the subconscious mind. So likewise, there can be both helpful and unhelpful samskaras. Regardless, if the action or the event is repeated, then the samskara becomes a part of the fabric of our beliefs and begins influencing our desires and actions. And the desire to act is called a vasana. Remember, we were speaking about vasanas and samskaras. And there's lots of different texts, different ways of describing it. So that's why I'm giving you lots of different takes on the scriptures or practice. You know, in your 200 hours, I go over and over almost the same thing in different ways for the yamas and yamas, just to really start to go in. So I'm keeping coming back to the same thing, but in different ways, just so on some level there'll be some sort of, there's a samskara formed. There you go. So vasana, it literally means the desire to respond. So you can have both positive, helpful, and negative or destructive vasanas. So an example of a positive vasana is your desire to practice yoga. Your past actions, karma, of doing yoga repeatedly have made an impression on you, which creates in you the desire to do it more. The more you do it, the stronger the samskara for doing yoga gets, and this increases your desire to continue doing it. Okay? So this is the wheel of karma working for you. So that's it, working for you. However, it works in the opposite way, keeping us playing out unhealthy patterns like a record stuck in a groove. So essentially, all actions create impressions. Strong impressions create tendencies, and these tendencies create the likelihood for future actions. So it's a cycle that can either work for or against you, but first you need to acknowledge that you're on it. You have created your present, no one else. The good news is that you're already and completely in charge of your own future, because Patanjali explains that yoga is the way and provides a step-by-step process to move beyond the negative impact of karma chakra by accessing the clear light of the seer, the one who truly sees, your soul. So from this vantage point, you will make virtuous, which is sattvic, choices aligned to your higher self and spin the karmic wheel in your favor as you spiral, rather than spin towards your ultimate destination, beyond karma, beyond the impact of the pairs of opposites, to that place where the finite, again, remembers its infinite nature. So the different ways that the mind spins negatively or can become afflicted is known as the kleshas. And I'm always coming back to the kleshas. I think it's very important to be aware of the kleshas in your life, I think. So chapter 2 of the Yoga Sutra, Sadhana Pada, we will go into the sutras deeper in this training and go over the Sadhana Padas. So it outlines the means to liberation. So a portion of this is also dedicated to the 5 kleshas, or sources of suffering. So those things which obstruct us from realizing that we're already liberated. The kleshas, according to Patanjali, are why we suffer. They are ignorance, egoism, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. Sutra 2.2 states the subject very clearly. The goal of yoga is not to obtain something that is lacking. It is the realization of an already present reality. So yoga practice removes the obstacles that obstruct this realization. So avidya is ignorance, is believing the unreal to be real. Avidya is the root klesha that creates the other four. It's the misconception of our true indestructible nature. Asmita, egoism, refers to ego identification, and it's the self-image we create and believe in. And although it feels and seems like us, it is not us. Those ideas are merely projections of a mind influenced by avidya. Raga is attachment. It's the attraction we feel for the things we want and deem as satisfying. And it's often our desire for pleasure that creates unskillful actions. So when we don't get what we want or what we think we deserve, we suffer. And on the other hand, when we do get these things, very soon our satisfaction fades and we start the search for new pleasure. And in doing so, trap ourselves in an endless cycle. Then we have devesha, aversion. This is the aversion we have towards things that we label as unpleasant. It's the opposite of raga. If we cannot avoid the things we dislike, we suffer. And then there's abhinavesha, clinging to life, or in other words, a fear of death. This is humanity's most fundamental fear and the deepest klesha, remaining with us until our deaths, unless we consciously confront it first. I'm grateful enough to have been given the opportunity during lockdown when I was told that I was probably dying. So I really worked with this klesha. So this is the reason for the tantric practice of carrying around a skull and using it as a cup or a begging bowl to confront the reality of death while still in the body. So it's very much, I can't remember which one of my teachers speak about this. It's very much about how we as a society, we're too busy thinking about like what, we're striving for the next thing and the next thing. And we're really we look at death as being a really awful thing, but it's inevitable. It's inevitable. So we should be almost like embracing it and being okay with it because it's going to happen anyway, but we're all kind of push that away. There's a really good documentary on Netflix that's about it's kind of like the dark side of life. He's like a kind of a less funny, darker version of Louis Theroux, and he visits different cultures and countries. I'll find out for you, but it's really interesting visiting different cultures and countries and things that they celebrate or do rituals over that we would go, what? That's just weird and wrong, or things in the world that are dark and one was going to you visited a tribe, and they're very much they celebrate death. So if somebody dies, they keep the body in the house and they have all this like celebrations. It's like I think they bury them and then they bring them back up sometimes and have them sitting in their house. Like, it's a really interesting documentary. I'll find out for you. It's like it's in parts, but yeah. But there's the bit about death is very interesting, and at that point I was studying the kleshas, and it's very relevant to abhinavesha. So I wasn't going off properly on a tangent this time. So the first step in regards to working with the kleshas is to stop hiding from them and simply acknowledge them. So transparency is the light that ultimately leads to the revelation of truth. So we have to see where and how we're stuck in order to move beyond the stuckness. So a lot of you guys I've read that poem to you about it's more like it's more for mindfulness, but it's the one I would say it's related to the ignorance one, where it's in little chapters where this person walks down a road and they fall down a hole, and then they get out of it, and the next day they walk down the road, they know the hole is there and fall down it anyway, and then the next day they it's like, so it goes on and on until eventually they take a different path. They keep falling in this hole knowing it's there, but it's like every time it's getting a little bit different, but it's almost like they've not acknowledged the hole is there and they keep making that same mistakes. And we I used to be like that with my choices in boys or men, but so we all have that in our lives. We're human beings. We're programmed to have our faults and have our kleshas, we've got our challenges. It's that our opportunities to grow, and everyone's got different aspects of that to work with. It's just knowing that it's actually, if it is a challenge, it's like looking at it and using it as an opportunity, as opposed to that's too uncomfortable, I'll deal with it later. Let's watch that documentary on Netflix about death, instead. So so it's about the transparency of it. So yoga practices, and in particular meditation, they burn away the impurities of the mind. So in doing so, they remove the influence of the kleshas. So once the mirror of the mind has been wiped clean, all that remains is a pure version or vision of our ultimate essence. So at the heart of all yoga is meditation. So it guides our awareness to a place beyond the fluctuations of the thinking mind. So it rests in a space of pure presence, in Purusha. Okay, so with asana and the moon, so we're not this isn't a moonology. We're not speaking about the moon literally. We're speaking about moon practices. But as some of you are moonologists, yoga and moonology teachers, you could use the tantric moon practices as part of your moon practice. So who's to say? There's no right or wrong here. So the moon, as already mentioned, is about the mind. So the moon orientated yoga is about making the mind increasingly more stable, calmer, receptive, and perceptive. So it's important to state that not all yoga will have this effect. Some, in fact, will do the opposite, and that's why it's incredibly valuable to belong to a lineage of some sort, or to know what lineage you're practicing, instead of mixing it up, making it brown class. So I've said to some of my yin yogis as well, yin is this, you don't do this, it's the reason for it is this, it's to stress the joints, and you're not completely flopping out and letting go. We've not done the restorative, the yoga for mental health, but restorative yoga is active relaxation. That's different. And then when you're practicing the asana physical yoga, you're strengthening and stretching the muscles. This is looking at the physical side, but then you have the lineages and where they come from. So what you're practicing and what you're teaching, where is it coming from and why are you doing it? What is the bhav? What is the biomechanics? What is the energetics of it? As opposed to, I've got all this stuff, I've learned all this, I'm going to mix it all in and make it really fun. It's like, don't make it up as you go along. You've got to really be systematic with it. I think that's the thing. Or you mix it up. I've said to a few of you before, I attend, I study a lot, I go to online trainings, online practices, and I went to one thing, this will be interesting, a yin to a yang, and it was just my whole body, it was like, it started off and like doing yin, and your body, your whole nervous system is just going, and then all of a sudden kicking into yang practice, so your body's going, what, I've just brought myself down, and then you're doing all this yang stuff and your energy's going, okay, right, all right then, I'll deal with this. And then they brought you back into a yin, and you're, by that time, by the end of Shavasana, you know you've done something with your body, but it's very confused. But pranically, I felt really out of sorts. So it was a good class, and the fact that I learned what not to do, and not, it was the way the person did it. Maybe they weren't a bad teacher, but energetically it didn't feel right for me. I wouldn't teach it, and I wouldn't advise you guys to teach that way either. So yeah, so it's really about it's just about keeping your practice and your teachings pure, in a sense. And you guys know I throw in Kundalini, and I throw in different, yeah, my practice is quite eclectic, but there's a reason behind what I do. So it's not that it's like I've practiced with various lineages, but I'm not trying to teach a brown class by mixing them all in to make it really interesting. Every time I teach, I want it to have bhav, or I want to give something. Okay, so that's really what it's saying. So in addition, using meditation and mantra helps to focus, calm, and stabilize the mind. And asana. So so you're just really wanting to move beyond just like vinyasing your way through life. So the effect of asana on the mind is attributable to the fact that certain shapes or poses initiate the downward moving of prana. And when complemented with correct breathing, it grounds the mind. And while other poses enliven the mind or even agitate it if overdone. So a downwards moving energy, apanavayu, is eliminating, letting go force, and it's cultivated through forward bending. Our centering and balancing energy is samanavayu, which increases our assimilative power on all levels, and it's culminated through twists. So with the right poses, sequencing, and breath, the mind can be brought to a standstill so that awareness can reside in the space beyond mind and touch, and its source, it's pure and effortless awareness. Okay, so teaching a moon class or any subtle body class requires the teacher to skillfully embody the subtle quality being taught. So regardless of what the theme is, there should always be an undercurrent of presence, stillness, direction, and ease when it comes to teaching the moon. So if you're too all over the place, and then you come in, hi, we're going to do a moon practice. You really need to find your own sense of stability before you. I normally, before I go online, do a little bit of Nadi Shodhana and get myself, so I'm not all, yeah, because a lot of you guys who know me know that I've got a lot of energy that needs to be grounded before I do things. So I have to do that. So if that's what you need to do, you do that too. So the goal of moon practice is guiding students towards a sense of their own unwavering awareness. Okay, so that is the moon. So let's look at the sun now. Okay, so the entire universe and everything in it turns in cycles, as we know. So at the completion of each cycle, everything starts over. Like a broken record, life goes on circling for those who are not on the dharmic path, and it spirals upwards, evolving and expanding for those who are. So it's really about trying to find yourself in that sort of way. It's very much about not working with, if you're really too much into working with the sun and you've not found the moon, it can agitate everything. So let's look at the content and the momentum of the solar path. So there's two factors that shape a person's world. This is the content and the momentum. So content, which is the underlying theme of the Yoga Sutra, and the lunar path, which deals with coming to understand what is permeating your cognitive field, your mind, and how to remove any acquired content or programming so the mind's innate luminosity and what lies beyond it can be accessed. But momentum is more a tantric solar approach that suggests that if you change your energetic patterning, your pranic body, for example, your doshas, gunas, vayus, chakras, then you change your perception of the world and also your perception of yourself. So prana is made up of two root words. Pr means primary, it's like the pr means primary, the first unit, the beginning, or that which permeates everything. And ana referring to that which moves or animates. Therefore, prana is the animating force that pervades everything, and it's the origin of all things. So everything is made of prana. It animates all of life, prakriti, and it's the creative or dynamic aspect of consciousness. So prana is the animating force behind all actions, whether these actions are moving us in a direction that's helpful or destructive. Prana is the prime mover in all instances. So the key and the goal of momentum-based yoga is to understand how to move and shape prana in a positive direction by empowering the methods to overcome obstacles more than you empower the obstacles themselves. Put quite simply, the more prana you have access to, the more you can have what you want, provided that you use it skillfully. So this empowered use of prana is how prana transforms into prana shakti. So prana shakti is the capacity of this universal animating force to create positive change. So when you skillfully to overcome limits and patterns and bring more sacredness into your life, it's called prana shakti. So the ancient hatha yoga texts, they go into more detail about the solar stage of practice, and they separate the path into 4 subcategories. So they come into asana, which is to clear the energetic blockages in the energy pathways, known as the nadis. And then there's kumbhaka and bandha. So this builds and contains the energy. So, and then there's mudra and kriya. So this directs the energy using inner kriyas and outer mudras. So the navel and spine are the key locations for directing prana, as are the 3 gates of meditation. And nada. So this is the result of practice. So it's merging with the light and the mantra-filled ocean of energy that supports and births all of life. So to master prana, we look at asana, we look at kumbhaka and bandha, we look at mudra and kriya, and we look at nada. Okay? So this sequential progression of practices exists at the heart of the sun practice. So through these 4 stages, the yogi deepens their connection to the pranic world around them and within them, and learns to access and direct this energy for the purpose of higher awakening. So let's speak about pranadharana. I briefly mentioned that this morning. So pranadharana is developing sensitivity to energy. So Tantra is the science of energy management. And the first stage in the process of developing higher perception to energy is called pranadharana. It's a process of contacting prana in the midbrain, the area that yogis refer to as the 3rd eye. I would say that you've got the Ajna chakra is the 3rd eye, but you also have the midbrain. It's like my teacher Rod Stryker explains it really well, how there is 2, and you can use that the pulsing that actually helps you to really access your higher self, your sense of self. And from studying neuroscience, the neuroscience of the brain, when people have experienced trauma, they learn to shut down their sense of self, which is located in the midbrain, funnily enough. So it's like the yogis knew intuitively that the midbrain was your sense of self, because there was no such thing as brain scanners or being able to see the activity of the brain. So it actually is phenomenal. So as we develop this connection, it's said that the third eye opens, and the result is that the pranic field generated around it begins to reveal more as what is beyond normal perception. I know that you guys have been practicing yoga for a while, and I'm sure that some of you guys have experienced that opening of the third eye. I know that many years ago, it was actually the first time it really occurred in a really like physical as well as like everything like spiritual. It was a really like powerful moment, and I was doing my advanced Reiki practitioner. It was working with Reiki, and it was just absolutely, it's really difficult to explain because it's I've had brief moments of samadhi as well, and it's untangible, it's so personal, it's difficult to explain, but once it's happened, there's like a knowingness that you're able to kind of step out of the matrix and be the curious observer, because things aren't as linear as we're told they are as we were brought into this world. So so the process to help to open the third eye, you can work with this by focusing on the airflow moving in and out the nostrils. The mind becomes more stable, and we begin to become aware of something other than the breath moving with it, a kind of energy, presence, or vibration riding the breath, known as prana shakti. So this is the force responsible for pulling your breath into you when you inhale and pushing the breath out of you when you exhale. Think about it. Who or what is moving your breath? There you go. So as the practice deepens and we become more sensitive to both the breath and the energetic component of the breath as it ascends and descends to and from the midbrain, awareness within the midbrain will develop also. We'll feel like a pool of awareness. It's got quality of vibration to it. We were trying to work with this today, so hopefully some of you really felt it. Don't worry if you didn't. So it may well feel like a magnetic pulse or a dull throbbing, either within the midbrain itself or further forwards towards the point in the skin between the eyebrows. And if you don't feel it, you will at some point. But in the meantime, just simply hold the intention in your mind, the subtle pulse in the midbrain, the result of pranadharana is currently developing, and it will become a living experience soon. So as with all subtle body experiences, intention opens the door, and then sensitivity, not visualization, reveals the essence of the object or practice. So regarding the third eye, the exact location of it is less important than developing sensitivity within that area. So the yogis refer to the opening of the third eye. It's considered the key to practicing kriya or tantric styles of meditation. So once the mind is imbued with enough intelligent pranic energy, whatever gets placed into this field of higher awareness will come fully to life. Whether it's a mantra, the breath, a flame, or a yantra, as it moves into proximity of the awakened third eye, the essence of the object, its highest potential, will reveal itself. The result is a gradual transfiguration of the mind. So the solar path, however, is not only about contacting prana and becoming more sensitive to it. More importantly, it's about what we do with the prana once it's in the body and how we direct it. So this is really what pranadharana is all about. So whether your goals are worldly, spiritual, or both, your skillfulness in pranadharana will be what dictates the results, because prana makes all of your goals more attainable. The technology of pranadharana is based on the idea that whatever is held within a concentrated field of prana will be made to live, and whatever is taken out of that field can never be fully alive. So let's look at stage 1. So this is called prana anusandana, okay, anusandana, ANUSANDHANA. So anusandana means research. So this is the initial stage of simply working with becoming aware of breath flow moving through the nostrils. At this stage, there's no awareness of the energetic component riding the breath. Then we'll go on to stage 2, which is called prana samvedana. So SAMVEDHANA. So this refers to becoming more sensitive to prana, more aware of the subtle component riding the waves of the physical breath. So you may sense prana as light, vibration, or presence accompanying the breath. So this is the stage that sets up all the following stages. So stage 3 is called prana sanchaya. So SANCHAYA. So sanchaya means to gather, like a honeybee gathers pollen. The yogi collects prana in the midbrain where there's more sensitivity to prana. Then there's stage 4, prana prasara. So after collecting prana, in this stage you move the concentrated energy to somewhere, perhaps a chakra, towards a mental kriya, towards a part of your body, or towards the fulfillment of a specific goal. During this stage, prana reveals the subtle truth of the experience, opposed to the mind trying to visualize it. Intention plays a big role in this stage. To fulfill yoga's highest intention, realization, prana is directed into the navel to cultivate fire or rudrani, and then into Shushumna to awaken non-dual awareness. So stages 5 and 6 is prana prachardana, which is PRACHARDHANA and VIDHARANA. These two stages combine to provide advanced students with a faster, more potent method of concentrating prana in the midbrain. And then you move into stage 7, which is prana prastita, which is PRATISTHA. So the stage of mastery is when you can infuse an environment, object, or person with awakened prana shakti. So this is prana prashita, the mastery of prana. So you don't have to know that or practice it, because this isn't a specific tantric teacher training. This is me just giving you some of the information, so you've got an understanding of tantric hatha yoga. So moving into prana and the spine, and the science of hatha yoga includes the classical model of Raja Yoga, but expands upon it. Tantra embraces the moon, but the primary focus is on pranic cultivation. Whereas classical yoga sought to take the mind beyond the body and reunite it with the sacred, Tantra says to do the opposite. Bring the sacred to you, because pure consciousness, supreme bliss, and unlimited power exist inside of you. So this is where Kundalini comes in. So Kundalini Shakti is the storehouse of our dormant power and bliss, which prana-based tantric practices are designed to access. It's more your fire practice, so we're not kind of reached there yet. So Tantra, which includes all of our modern hatha practices, claims that although these two qualities are intricately intertwined, it's easier to access and direct prana than it is to direct and control chitta. So it's easier to access and direct energy than it is to direct and access and control the mind. So why not take the faster approach? So yoga is a science. So energetic efficiency, using the least amount of effort to achieve the greatest possible results, is highly prized. And so the awakening of Kundalini Shakti, our divine potential bound at the base of our spine, which with the right attitude and steady practice can be stirred and released, grants liberation while still in the body. So how do we do that? The Hatha Yoga Pradipika is very clear in this. The yogi is the one who has life, who has prana in their spine. So this understanding is the basis for all our modern practices, from asana to pranayama to bandha, mudra and beyond. And what's interesting, however, is that modern yoga has taken the container, asana, and made it the focus, and largely overlooking the major practices that specifically and elegantly direct prana into the spine. So in all of the tantric texts we have on the science of yoga, asana comprises the first or one of the first chapters only. So it suggests that it is only of minor significance compared to the practices that come after, specifically pranayama. So this involves deepening our connection to prana and learning how to direct it. So the essence of Tantra, Hatha Yoga, is this. Stabilize your mind first. Cultivate energy. Generate subtle heat. Melt limitations, Awaken dormant power. Move prana into your spine. Connect to your heart. And live your purpose. So notice that a focus on stilling the fluctuations of the mind, as Patanjali suggests, is still at the forefront. However, the intention is much different. So the mind is to be made quiet and our personality refined for the supreme purpose of safe cultivation of prana. And prana is then used to initiate an inner awakening so we can embody the higher version of ourselves and share our gifts in a way that serves the whole. So the essence of Tantra is brought to life in the epic story of the Bhagavad Gita. So yoga doesn't consider the inhalation or the exhalation, whether spontaneous or controlled, as part of pranayama. Pranayama is traditionally what you do beyond the regular flow of the breath, namely when and how you retain it. So let's have a look at the 4 parts of the breath that will serve our pranayama practice. Puraka is in breath. Antara kumbhaka, retention. Richaka, out breath. And Baya kumbhaka is held out retention. So we've worked with this in our sun practice today. So with pranayama, all 4 aspects of the breath are consciously organized, and specific ratios are then applied to each part along with bandhas, mudras and mantras in more advanced practices, affecting our energy levels and perception in precise ways. So kumbhaka, regarding retentions, initially they may trigger a reactive response in the reptilian brain, sensing it as a threat. Think of damming up a river. One moment the momentum of the river is flowing at a certain speed, and then all of a sudden it's forced to come to a standstill. What happens at this point to the content of the river? The stuff flowing with the current under the surface that's not noticeable while the river is flowing. It comes to the surface very quickly, as does our mind stuff, when we retain the breath and change or halt the momentum of prana. And usually this is not very nice to look at. So when the river is flowing, the stuff is not visible. It's flowing along beneath the surface, Others may see it, but personally, it's harder to detect. When momentum comes to stop, there are two choices. Have you ever noticed people getting up in the middle of yoga classes and walking out, or leaving Vipassana after day 3? This quite often speaks to one of the possible responses. You abort the damning mission and restart the momentum flowing again back as it was. You escape and become even more identified with your stuff. So the ideal option, however, is that you stay and you deal with whatever comes up. And this is what's happened to all of us on a more of a physical level for this, when we experienced lockdown. We weren't able to escape from ourselves and go with the flow of life. We were contained and we had to deal with what was coming up. So this is like we can apply these teachings to our lives right now in the battlefield of life. So this is the whole point. Intentional provocation. So you look at your stuff. You gain deeper insight into the nature of your psychology, and ultimately move beyond it and become a more resilient and stable person in the process. With continued practice, the retentions will lose their stimulating effect and become a source of nourishment and healthy challenge. And as a result, you will also become more fearless. I actually love the feeling of kumbhaka. And when you're holding the breath out or in, that is the time when you have the doorway to your subconscious. That moment of stillness, the space between breaths, is the space of where you can access who you really are. Okay, so it's really, really important. But obviously, this is why you do not teach kumbhaka to beginners. They freak out. They don't want to all of a sudden have all their stuff come up, and if they're not used to it. So us as yogis, we can work with this, and we know to work with this. And you know yourself as well. You've been on the path for a long time. The stuff comes up and it doesn't go, oh, well, that's me cleared myself out. I'm fine now. Because then once you've cleared that up, another layer will reveal itself. It's a bit like cleaning your house. You can clean your house, but then you have to keep doing it. It's like housework keeps coming back. It's the same with, it's never like, oh, that's me, never have to do housework again. That would be great, because I'm not a fan, I must admit. But it's the same with doing housework on yourself. You're in your spring cleaning of yourself. The more you work on yourself, the more comes up for you, and then eventually the real stuff comes up for you, and that could be incredibly painful. But if that real stuff had come up for you right at the beginning when you first found your yoga, you'd probably have a bit of a breakdown because you weren't ready to look at that aspect. So it is a process. It's a gradual process. So yogis use this triggering response as a challenge to remain calm and deepen their connection to the witness. Pranayama is considered the ultimate tapas because of the intimacy between the breath and the mind. So the level of stability that asana can create in the mind, therefore, is not nearly as much as what pranayama can provide, but the stakes are higher. So the wrong application of pranayama or overdoing it can create a subconscious upheaval if what is coming up is unable to be sufficiently processed and assimilated. So this is exactly what you said. So it's like a calm, stable mind is the key. The safeguard regarding pranayama is that most students are too lazy to do the kind of deep pranayama work that can create serious mental instability. Okay, so yourself, there's so many people would rather just get on with the fancy forearm balancing than sit and concentrate and count the breaths and really work with that, because to them it's boring, but it's also because they've been pushing away their stuff. They'd rather keep moving and not even, they're not so keen on the static poses. And I know myself, like when I first found yoga, I just needed to move, you know, and because that it was a way of connecting to myself, but I wasn't ready to deal with some of the major stuff that had happened in my life. And glad I've gone through it as a systematic process. Otherwise, yeah, I would have probably been a bit crazy, or crazier than I am. So we're all crazy. We're just so much, everyone pretends not to be. That's the truth of the matter, really, isn't it? So, so regarding longer retentions, so holds after the inhale, which we were doing today, Antara Kumbhaka with bandhas produces a nourishing form of provocation. So they deal primarily with your relationship to personal power. So it's like Manipura chakra stuff as well. We were working with the chest, but if you're esoterically wanting to, or energetically want to work with the chakras, it's another one. So long holds after exhalation, Baya Kumbhaka, using bandhas typically triggers a deeper psychological response. So even accessing core fears around death and existence. So they deal primarily with relinquishing control and letting go. Okay, so Kumbhaka after the inhale is your relationship to personal power. Kumbhaka after exhale is like deep psychological stuff, and it deals with relinquishing control and letting go. Okay, I think it's so important as yogis to know this stuff, but everyone's just going on to workshops on how to do a better forearm balance, or a wild thing to put your leg around your head and stuff like that. This is the real stuff where you can make a difference to yourself and your life and the others around you. So as you evolve your practice and incorporate more breath orientated work, either for yourself or your students, it's important to progress systematically and slowly, as I said. So done well, it can transform the mind very quickly and effectively. However, done hastily or incorrectly, it can lead to major issues, both mentally and physically, and it can bring spiritual evolution to a standstill. So generally, the idea is that progress is marked by an increase in your capacity to retain the breath both in and out for longer periods of time. So this holding creates a heating effect that destabilizes and changes old patterns. So it brings them all to the surface to be purified and liberated. This also allows for the development of increasingly more potent witnessing power. So being able to hold yourself in the seat of the observer when energy starts to move and amplify in intensity. So pranayama, when done correctly, will by design bring your stuff to the surface. That's the point. So in summary, Kumbhaka and Bandha are the best practices for damming purposes. So it's important to really understand that the yogis wanted this. They sought out and manufactured ways to trigger psychological friction. And what they found was that the longer the breath retention or suspension, the more intense the challenge, but the more luminous the reward. So just to reiterate, work slowly and systematically. So this is a step-by-step progression for developing a pranayama practice. Okay, so step 1, cultivate a smooth and even breath in asana practice, and ensure that asanas can be held with physical stability and mental ease for extended time periods. Step 2, consciously change the pattern of the breath during asana and also in seated work, either increasing the length of inhalation or exhalation. And ideally work with increasing the exhalations first to create greater ease and calmness. So this stage begins to challenge ingrained patterns of breathing and thinking. Step 3, add in short retentions after the exhale. So it helps to build witness consciousness. Step 4, add in short retentions after the inhale. So these are more provocative than holds after the exhale. Step 5, add in longer holds after the inhale and exhale. And step 6, longer breath holds now with the application of bandhas. So this is when things really start to come to the surface for transformation. So it's important to note that doing this kind of advanced pranayama too soon can reinforce negative patterns. So be prepared, do the groundwork, and get yourself prepared first. So if ojas is low, don't do advanced pranayama with bandhas and breath holds. So remember, ojas is, we spoke about the vayus. So vata has prana, and the way you work with prana from the vata perspective is with the vayus. The tejas, it comes from pitta, and that's the assimilation and the burning fire. So you're working with bringing apana and prana. You're trying to build them behind the navel point, build that fire. And ojas is where the kapha comes from. So this is like the sacred fluids within you. So you want to make sure you're feeling calm, stable, you're settled in that sort of sense, and you're not like throwing everything, your energy around too much, getting all sweaty, and you need to be in a strong sense before you can really go further. So we need to build our ojas. So that is the tantric way. So everyone speaks about Sting from the Police, and he's a tantric, and it's just because he did some sexual stuff where you've got to hold yourself back or whatever. He's looked into that, and that's the ojas part. It wasn't the scientific part. He's maybe gone further, but back in the early 90s, that was the thing. His PR person just maybe picked up on it. He probably didn't, and then it's just been this big thing. But anyway, when you're healthy and you're prepared, doing pranayama for about 7 to 15 minutes is ideal. So you don't need more than that. That's the kind of how much, for my personal daily practice, I would do about that. And I do my asana. This is the way I work my practices now. I do my asana, I do my rituals and my cacao, and I do more of like a ritual, but I do meditate, but then and that's my meditations, but then I'll do my asana practice, and then I work with pranayama practice, depending on what the bhav is of the day, and then I do my meditation practice, and I tend to do a bit of yin or restorative in the evening as well. But I'm lucky that I've got that. My work is yoga, my life is yoga, but in a sense, yeah, I do need to get more of a life and see humans, not just live and breathe yoga. That's what I do really nowadays. So I'm a bit like that old mannies that go and live in the caves right now. I don't see any humans. They didn't have cats that meowed in their face though when they were teaching. So always begin with at least a few asanas prior to your pranayama practice as well. And steady the moon first, always. Okay, make sure you're steady, that your moon is still steady and calm. Okay, I think I've given you loads and loads of information. Yeah, well, maybe you're wanting more right now, but I think if I keep giving you loads and loads and loads, it's not going to just sit. So I want to give you things in chunks, and so that it can then leave you to have time to have it all to come in. So I'm going to put you off record.